position groups. Is Texas going to be better at quarterback? Is Texas going to be better at wide receiver this year than last year? Let's talk about that. And let's start out, obviously, with quarterback. And I'll let you start off with this one first.
This one I feel weird talking about, right? Because I am not one of these people that's crapping on Quinn Ewers and his performance at Texas. If you've been around here long enough, you've heard me say, like, we need some perspective on Quinn Ewers, right? We need to talk about, like, Quinn Ewers is the most successful quarterback at Texas since Colt McCoy. But with that being said, I think the quarterback position is going to be better, right? Because of the dynamic playmaking that Arch Manning brings as a runner, right? And Sark is never going to be, he said it before, and we've echoed it, like, he's not going to be a run your quarterback 10 or 15 times a game kind of guy, because that's a quick way to get a guy hurt. But you have to respect Arch's legs, his ability to stretch the field with his feet, to reset the pocket, to move on a rollout. Again, I don't expect Sark to be a quarterback run guy. I don't think if Arch is running a ton next year, that's probably a bad thing for Texas. It means that the offensive line is struggling, or Sark is struggling to find a spark in the offense. But I do think Arch's ability with his legs, I think he might be probably more accurate on the deep balls than we've seen from Quinn Ewers. So I think, again, this is not a knock at Quinn Ewers, because I am somebody who loves and respects what Quinn Ewers did at Texas, but I think the quarterback position will be better next year.
No, I agree with that. Anyone that was saying, hey, last year Arch should have played, he shouldn't have. You saw they kind of neutered the offense, honestly, when he came into the game. Like, we had to scrap like 20-25% of the playbook because he didn't understand that, and that's perfectly fine. I think he's going to get almost all the way there this year. I think he's going to be pretty close. And I agree. The deep ball is going to be much better. Quinn Ewers either overthrew the deep ball or underthrew the deep ball. He never really had it down to where he needed it to be, but he was great, between 15, 25 yards. He was fantastic in the intermediate game. That's something I could see Quinn Ewers being better than Arch Manning, because honestly, he was one of the best college football players at the quarterback position at that. Now, the check down game, I think as long as Arch takes the check downs, he'll be fine. That might be the issue, as we saw in a couple games, is it's there, but I don't really want it. I want the deep shot. His check down was a 50-50 deep shot, and that's not sustainable. You will not win a national championship doing that. So I definitely think deep ball wise, we're going to be better. Intermediate, I think maybe the same. I honestly think Quinn will be a little bit better there. And then check down, I think will be about the same. So overall, I do expect Arch to be better. And then, like you said, the athleticism. I think Arch is an athlete, obviously, as we saw. I think we're going to use him a little bit in the red zone. Not a lot. I don't think we're going to run him every time in the red zone. But, on an important red zone trip, I think we're going to use him. And I think Sark has told Arch, hey, use your athleticism, but don't abuse the athleticism, because then that's how you get hurt. So I do agree. I think we will be better at the quarterback position. I know we just added a quarterback, but I'm going to be honest, that guy's going to be third or fourth string. I'm not going to really waste too much air and time on that, because, no offense to him, I don't even know why he transferred. I think he's going to end up being probably the third string this year, and then might transfer or stay around, I guess, be the fourth string next year.
I mean, if you got an opportunity to come to Texas, and he probably got a nice little, NIL check, he probably is going to come and get a free MBA from McCombs, right? That's not really a lose in that, right? Come hang out in one of the best cities in the country, get a little NIL check, get a free MBA from McCombs. Like, I can't blame the kid, right? Just come hang out, have a couple cool years in Austin, and then go, be an investment banker or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's very true. Let's talk about running back now. So we lose Jaden Blue. He was our second best. I think he was our second best running back last year. Obviously, Trey Wisner returning, CJ Baxter returning from injury, Jarrett Gibson, Christian Clark, Ricky Stewart, those guys, James Simon. Do you think we will be better at the running back position this year?
There's a big asterisk here, because, like, how could it be worse than it was last year, right? Because our pets' heads were falling off, right? There are multiple injuries week after week. So CJ Baxter coming back healthy, I think, raises the ceiling of that room significantly. I think, you've got a depth in that room. I think Texas, is missing the second pitch in that room. I think all of those guys run pretty similarly. And so I think Texas is not going to have that home run hitter consistently at the running back position like they did have. And Jaden Blue, to his credit, he was the fastest running back, one of the fastest players on the team. But he always seemed to be one step away from breaking it. So Texas didn't really seem to have that home run hitter at running back regardless, outside of that one play, I think, in the playoffs. So ultimately, I think the running back room can't be worse than last year, because the guys, hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, should be healthy. And the best ability for a player is availability. And so getting these guys back healthy means that it's going to be better this year.
I think it's this simple. If CJ Baxter is 85% of what he was his freshman year, and I think we're better. If he's not, I think we're going to be about the same or worse. I like Trey Wisner. I know I've seen some comments on here saying we're too tough or I'm too tough on Trey Wisner. I like him. I think he's a good football player. What I'm saying and what I tell you guys is the truth about winning national championships. I don't think Trey Wisner can be your number one running back on a national championship team. And then people ask, well, why? I'll tell you why. Look at the last 10 to 12 national championship teams. The worst running back on the national championship team, in my opinion, has been Wayne Gallman on Clemson. I think, and Wayne Gallman got drafted in like the 3rd or 4th round in the NFL draft. Trey Wisner will not be drafted in the 3rd or 4th round in the NFL draft. I don't like saying that, but it's just not going to happen. I think he's a good player, and I do think he will play in the NFL. I'm very confident in saying that. But you have to have more talent there at the running back position. He was going to be the 3rd running back last year for a reason, guys. There was a reason behind that. So I do think it's going to either be the same or slightly better, but I don't think it's going to be much better because I don't expect CJ Baxter to come in right away after that knee injury and just like light things on fire and be his totally normal self.
And this is one of those things where like multiple things can be true at the same time, right? Like I love and respect Trey Wisner for how he's conducted himself at Texas. He was almost a guy that didn't end up in that recruiting class, right? Because of just how he played. He got benched in high school for a guy who he had to move to wide receiver because somebody else came in and was a better running back than him, right? So like Trey Wisner should not have done the things that he did last year. He was a 1,000-yard rusher. He was great for Texas. He's been all about his business. He's been all about the team. And like those are the guys that set your culture and create a championship winning culture, right? But also Trey Wisner was basically number 500 in the country coming out of high school. So like that was the expectation for him. Trey Wisner has produced above and beyond what we thought he could do as a 3-star kid coming in, right? But I think Texas needs more from the running back position, especially I think the biggest differentiator for me is the ability to bang it out in the red zone, right? I think CJ Baxter brings some of that. Jarrett Gibson brings some of that. Christian Clark brings some of that. Trey Wisner's just not that big of a guy. He's not that thick of a guy. He's not that powerful of a runner that these other guys bring to the table. And so again, this is not me crapping on Trey Wisner because I'm a huge Trey Wisner fan. I hyped him up as much as I could, as much as I can. Listen to some of the old podcasts I did on the other platform, right? Trey Wisner is a guy who I will forever appreciate and should never have to buy a drink in the city of Austin again. Period. End of sentence. He was incredible for Texas last year. But Texas has to be better at running back if they want to be competitive, right? Texas's inability to get the ball, the running game going was a limiting factor. Go look at the splits in wins and losses from last year statistically. Their worst running games were their worst games. Right. So Texas has to be better at running back. And some of that falls on the offensive line. Don't hear me saying that. Don't miss that I'm saying that, right? Texas, some of that falls on the offensive line, but ultimately Texas needs more out of the running game.
100%. So I'm going to go slightly better. I'm not going to say a lot better. What do you think?
I think it all, my notes say better if CJ Baxter's healthy. Right?
Okay.
If CJ Baxter's healthy, they'll be better.
Yeah, we're on the same page then. Wide receiver. So you lose Bond, you lose Golden, you lose Cook. I threw him in there because obviously some people had a lot of expectations for him. You lose Silas Bolden as well. DeAndre Moore had an injury in the spring. Ryan Wingo had an injury in the spring. How do you see this wide receiver room next year compared to last year?
I think by virtue of just like where it's at right now, I think it's going to be worse, right? Like when we look at where we're at today versus where we were 12 months ago, like I just don't feel as good about the position as I did last year. And I think this is probably the group on the team that has the widest variance between floor and ceiling, right?
Yeah.
I think the ceiling of this group is astronomical. The level of talent in this room is through the stinking roof. You've got stars on stars on stars. You've got experienced guys transferring in. You've got a lot of disparate skill sets. Like there's a lot of good that could come from this room. But the floor, I don't know what the floor is, and it could be pretty low, right? It could be a group that has a very low floor. And so last year, you had Matthew Golden, you even had Isaiah Bond early in the season, right? Before he got injured. It's like there's just no way I think this group can be. I don't want to say there's no way. As it stands right now, I feel less confident about this room than I did a year ago.
Yeah, so this one's kind of similar to the running back room for me. If Ryan Wingo is healthy and this hamstring doesn't linger, I said I think he's going to be the best wide receiver to step at on Texas's campus since Roy Williams, and I stand by that.
Okay.
But there's only one of him. So I think if I'm ranking based off last year, if Ryan Wingo hits 90% of his peak this year, then it's Matthew Golden for me. And then who is number 3? Like last year, we had Isaiah Bond when he was healthy would be better than anyone right now in that wide receiver room. So I think it's going to be slightly worse. I don't think it's going to be a lot worse. I think it's going to be slightly worse. I would agree. I think it's going to be slightly the worse. But overall, I still think it's a really good room. Like, let's be honest here. This would be the best wide receiver room in Tom Herman or Charlie Strong era by a lot. It wouldn't even be close.
Without a doubt. And that's what I've got. Like I want to call it a push, really. Like I don't have a firm read on it, but I think just based on like, I just don't know who the guys are going to be, right? There are so many question marks. We knew last year that it was going to be Isaiah Bond. It turned out to be Matthew Golden. Doesn't matter, right? Texas had a guy, surefire guy 2 years ago, right? Texas had Xavier Worthy, then Adonai Mitchell, A.D. Mitchell. It's like we knew going into the year who the guy was going to be. We don't know who the guy's going to be this year. And so that to me makes it worse.
I think we're on the same page. Now, this will be interesting. Tight end. And I would have said way, way worse if we didn't land Jack Endries. I would have said that. But I think this room has a higher upside with him. I really believe that. I think he's one of the 3 best tight ends in college football. I think he's going to be probably a second-round draft pick whenever he decides to come out. So I think this room's going to be better. I do. I think there's also more like higher tier athleticism in this room. Like if Nick Townsend can pick up the playbook quickly, he's the best tight end like athlete we've had here in a very, very long time. He's a better athlete than Jatavian Sanders. He's a better athlete than Gunnar Helm. That guy's a freak at the tight end position. I think Jordan Washington is a really good athlete at the tight end position. And I think Spencer Shannon can play a decent role in this offense. So I like the upside of this room, and that's why I do think it's going to be better than last year's tight end room, especially since we got literally nothing from Amari Niblack. I expected decent things from him, like 300 or 400 yards receiving. He couldn't even give me that. So I think this year's tight end room will be better.
Yeah, I think based on sheer depth, I definitely think this year's tight end room is going to be better. I mean, you mentioned some of the names. I think, Endries is going to be your top guy, but then you got Jordan Washington, who got some run last year. Right? Spencer Shannon is a nightmare, like, matchup for anybody, right? Just huge athletic guy. And I think all these guys are willing blockers. So I think when you've got a room full of guys that are both threats in the passing game and willing blockers, you really create something. And Texas didn't have that last year past Gunnar Helm. And so I think, do I think that, Jack Endries will match what Gunnar Helm did? I feel like it'd be an unfair expectation to put on him. I think he could. I think he's talented enough to do it. But I think, being the focal point of the offense like Gunnar Helm was in so many ways is an unfair expectation to put on somebody. That being said, I think Texas will have more contributors in the tight end room. Texas will be able to do some multiple tight end personnel. They'll be able to flex somebody out. They'll be able to do some more interesting schematic things that Steve Sarkisian likes to do because they'll have more guys at tight end that can do those things.
So you would go slightly better as well?
I will go slightly better.
Okay, so we're on the same page. I think the offense as a whole, once we'll hit offensive line and then we'll talk about that, but I think it will be slightly better as a whole overall as well. Let's go to the offensive line. I mean, we lose 4 out of 5 starters. So I do think later in the year, its peak will be higher than last year's offensive line peak. I will say that, but it's going to take a little bit of time to get up to speed because you have 4 new starters there. And Devon Campbell has yet to live up to expectations. So he's got to be able to do that. I trust in Trevor Gooseby. I trust in Devon Campbell for the most part. I think Cole Hudson's going to be a pretty good center. I actually think he's going to be better in certain areas than Jake Majors. Not setting protections and stuff like that, which is very important, but just straight up when the ball snap, I think he can be a better center than Jake Majors. Same thing at guard. I think Umlu Zulu will be better than Hayden Connor overall as a guard. My only question mark is right tackle because Brandon Baker honestly hasn't been like, yep, he's our right tackle. There's still a competition going there, which is a little concerning.
Yeah, and I think, my initial thought is like Texas will be worse by virtue of Kelvin Banks not being there, right? Like you have an offensive line unit that doesn't have Kelvin Banks. And so there's that like looming in the background. So I think removing Kelvin Banks from any unit just means they're going to be worse than they were a year ago, but it's not going to be a bad unit. But I think you hit the nail on the head, Matthew, where, offensive line, more than I think any unit on the field, needs time to gel, right? Needs time to learn, because it's all about communicating with the guy next to you and positioning your body. Where do my feet need to go so they don't trip over them as they pull, right? Where do my hands go on a chip block versus his hands? So I think this Texas unit has a ton of talent, but I think, and this is going to be the big test. Texas going into Ohio State week 1, this offensive line is going to have to grow up really, really fast. They're going to have to do a lot of great work because Ohio State's got a really solid defensive front. And so, you got a young quarterback back there. But back to the point, I think they're going to be worse, but not bad, right? And they're not going to be a bad unit. It's going to take up a little bit of time, but worse simply by the virtue of, like, Kelvin Banks is gone. 80% of your starts are gone, right? Like, that's just, it's hard to replace that.
So this is the only thing that I think position group we even disagree on a little bit, because I think they're going to be slightly better. You think they're going to be slightly worse. And what about the offense as a whole? Do you think it's going to be a lot better, a little bit better, same? What do you think?
I think the offense will be slightly better because I feel like it'll be more dynamic. I feel like the offense will be more dynamic. I feel like the offense will hit some bigger chunk plays than Texas did this past year. I think it's going to be a bit more what we expected to see from Steve Sarkisian when he came in, seeing some big chunk plays, seeing some big explosive plays. That's been the big, I think, missing factor for the Texas offense over the last couple of years. And I think that will, again, if the offensive line is decent, if Arch Manning is who we think he is, right? If these wide receivers, even if it's, in a kind of group, a wide receiver by committee situation, I think overall the offense will be more explosive and it'll be better than it was a year ago.
I completely agree. I think it's going to be slightly better. I think we were basically like a top 20 offense last year. I'm thinking more of top 12, top 13 type offense this year. I think it's going to be slightly better. That does it for the offensive side of the ball.